Howdy swim fans, here with another episode of Whiteboard Wednesday, and on today's episode, we're discussing open water drafting. What is it, how does it work, and some tips that you can use to apply to your next open water competition. Now first, we need to understand what open water drafting is. Now the concept of drafting is something that's really popular in professional cycling and in Formula One NASCAR racing. Now drafting is the concept where you actually enhance your own performance by leveraging the position of a leading competitor. In other words, in a pool or in open water, you'll be swimming either directly behind or next to a leading competitor so that their draft can essentially pull you. Now, why would you do this? Firstly, it can reduce the amount of energy expenditure you use to go the exact same speed. In fact, studies have shown that in professional cycling, you can reduce your energy expenditure by up to 38%. In other words, you can swim faster with less effort. And to give you an idea of just how much faster you can swim, in an Olympic distance triathlon, the swim portion, which is about 1,500 meters or about a mile, you can cut up to 1 to 2 minutes just by drafting someone and not applying any more additional energy. In an Ironman competition, you'll be able to chop off 5 to 10 minutes if you can draft someone the entire race. Now, how does this concept of drafting actually work? So you'll have a lead swimmer in the open water, and recognizing the concept that water is 800 times more dense than air, there's a lot of resistance. And so this lead swimmer is essentially a displacement vessel. So the lead swimmer is creating this entire draft zone behind them and besides them, and this draft zone is directional. So they're basically pulling and displacing water in the direction that they're going, both forward and laterally. And so what you have is this bow wave. Now this bow wave is created starting from about the diaphragm and the hips down, and so there's a draft immediately next to the swimmer on both sides and immediately behind them. And the goal in open water swimming is to stay in someone else's draft zone as long as possible. Now the impact and the effectiveness of this draft on another swimmer comes down to three main variables. And the three main variables are the speed. So in other words, the faster the swimmer is going, the faster they're displacing water as this displacement vessel, a ship if you will, the more draft there's going to be. So the faster the swimmer, the faster the draft. The bigger the swimmer, the size is the second component. The bigger the swimmer and the more mass carries, the more momentum they're going to have, and the bigger the draft is going to be. So these two functions, momentum is equal to mass times velocity. So the bigger the mass, the bigger velocity, the bigger the momentum of this displacement vessel, the lead swimmer. And finally, it's your position. And so this is the factor that you can actually control yourself. When you are drafting another swimmer, you have a few different options of where you can position yourself to the lead swimmer. You can either swim directly behind the lead swimmer, and this is called following their feet. And this is a great position to get a lot of draft, but an even better position is actually to ride the bow wave of the lead swimmer. In other words, you're going to be positioned immediately next to the lead swimmer, a little bit behind them. So that way it's like you're surfing their wave that they're creating. If you imagine a ship that's moving, you're basically riding the wave of the bow wave of that ship. And this is the best position to be in because you not only get the biggest draft potential, but it also impacts your stroke the least. In other words, when you're swimming behind another swimmer, there's often a lot of bubbles and water agitation. So that can actually impact your stroke, negatively impact your stroke. And so when you're positioned next to them in the bow wave, no further up than their shoulders, you actually eliminate any water displacement that the other swimmer is creating for you, and you get to have clean water as if you're swimming on your own. So there's less stroke interference, and you actually get the best opportunity for sighting. So if you swim behind the lead swimmer, you're constantly lifting your head up, and you have to sight more frequently to make sure you're going in the right direction and to make sure you're actually following the lead swimmer. If you can position yourself so that when you breathe, you're actually breathing into the lead swimmer, not only will their body actually protect you from different current and waves that could come, but it allows you to not have to lift your head up when you're sighting, assuming you're following in a straight line, and that's one of the tips we're going to get into just now. So what are some tips that you can use to really maximize your open water drafting potential? So first of all, it's match the speed of the lead swimmer. So it does you no good to swim directly next to them or even ahead of them, because then they're going to be in your draft. So ideally, you're actually going to be positioned at the same speed as them, just at their hip level, so that way as you extend your arms, you're never going to cross their shoulders or even their chest line. Also, it's really important that if you're next to another swimmer, and let's say, this is the lead swimmer and you're 3 or 4 meters laterally to them, it's actually better to speed up or slow yourself down so that way you can match the lead swimmer. And you want to swim parallel to the swimmer and stay in their draft zone as long as possible, so that only by the end of the race, when you have all of your saved energy because you're drafting them, you can actually pass them or even pass a group at the end of the race. Another tip is, in the middle of the race, it's actually okay to position yourself behind the lead swimmer. So here I have an illustration of a lot of swimmers, and this is a really big draft zone. The bigger the draft zone, by the way, the bigger the group of swimmers, the bigger the draft zone. So if you think about it as a ship, one swimmer will create a certain amount of draft, and if you have 10 swimmers and you happen to be in the middle or in the back, you're actually going to get significantly more draft, and this whole body of people is going to create a much bigger displacement vessel. So it's really important to match your speed to this group, and you never really want to swim alone in open water if you can find a group that swims just about as fast as you. And so beware of the false sense of speed. What can happen is you'll be drafting another swimmer and you'll feel like you're going really, really fast without using a lot of energy, when in fact you're using too little energy, and you would have been faster if you just swam on your own and found a faster group. So be careful not to hinder your own swimming potential. And going back to your positioning, in the middle of the race, it's okay to swim directly behind another swimmer, because most likely they're not going to be kicking as much in a longer race. So depending on the water agitation of the swimmer that you're drafting off of, that can actually impact where you want to position yourself. And that's what you can figure out during the race, based on the mechanics of the other swimmer, how you can position yourself. And also, don't follow someone in the wrong direction. It can be terrible if you're swimming and you have a great draft, but the two of you or the group is swimming in the wrong direction and you're not actually swimming to the buoy. So it's really important that you make sure that you're always sighting and you're in a pack that's actually going in the right direction. So regardless of the 38% energy expenditure that you're going to save, if you're swimming in the wrong direction, it's not going to help you. Now, what are some tips that you can use to apply some of these skills into the open water? So here's a few different things that you can do in the pool that you can then take into open water. Ideally, you can train in open water, but if you can't, here are some things that you can do in the pool. So there's two different drafting techniques that we talked about. The first is following another swimmer's feet. So if you have 2 or 3 other swimmers with you in a lane, swim 1 or 2 feet or less than 1 meter away from the swimmer in front of you, and that way you can get a feel of what it's like to swim immediately behind another swimmer. Traditionally, you'll wait 5 or 10 seconds before the next swimmer pushes off the wall, but for this skill, as you can see in this illustration, you want to have the lead swimmer push off the wall, and immediately the next swimmer and the following swimmer, and you can have up to 10 swimmers all following each other very, very closely. And the idea is you want to be able to feel what it's like to essentially reach for someone else's toes in front of you and feel that draft. And every 100 meters or so, or even every length, 25 meters if you're in a 25-meter pool, you can actually change position, and you can have the lead swimmer stop at the wall, the second swimmer will become the lead swimmer, and you can even do an Indian-style relay. So in the course of a 25 or 50-meter pool, you can have the last swimmer actually chase and pass all the swimmers and become the lead swimmer by the end of the length. That's a really fun drill that you can do. Another method of practicing open water drafting in a pool is where you focus on the bow wave and focus on that skill, where you essentially have 2, 3, or 4 swimmers all in one lane, and they're all swimming at the same time. So the opposite of having a draft following the feet, all the swimmers are going to be at the bow of the lead swimmer, who's going to be in the middle of the lane. So have the lead swimmer position themselves directly in the middle, and all the other swimmers, whether it's 1 on each side, or if you can even fit 5 people into a lane, they're going to be a little bit behind that swimmer, and they're trying to ride the bow wave of the lead swimmer. These are 2 really fun skills that you can practice open water drafting in the pool. If you have any more questions about open water drafting or the concept of drafting at all, make sure you leave them in the comments below. And this was Whiteboard Wednesday. Hopefully you can take these skills. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you guys next time. Bye.